Good afternoon. Welcome to our informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Today's date is Tuesday, December 3rd. Welcome to all those in attendance here at Carnegie, those that may be watching on CityLink or on the web stream. We have a fairly short agenda for our informational meeting today, and we have no fiscal committee meeting after this today, so we'll go from our informational meeting and then at 7 o'clock our regular City Council meeting. First order of business today is open discussion. Do we have any councilors that would like to bring anything to the rest? Councilor Staggers.
Yes. On the consent agenda this evening, I'm going to pull a couple items. One of them is going to deal with the approval of the City Council minutes for November 19th. There's an error in the minutes, and I'll bring that up, what it is. Okay. And then also bringing up on the contracts, the one dealing with the Phillips Avenue from 6th Street to 14th Street, dealing with the putting up the Christmas decorations and things like that. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We will see if we can get somebody here from the administration that can discuss that. Okay. Councilor Rolfe?
Councilor, did you have a chance to do those? Is this the first time they're notified that?
I've notified Jim.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So before today.
Oh, not
so
before
that these
today.
People, I thought we were trying to get that done like on Friday or something
Ideally,
when we got those out so that these people are not inconvenienced by dragging them out of their homes at night to come down here.
Well, the important thing is,
Rolfing, it is the council's privilege to be able to pull stuff off the consent agenda, and the more advance notice that we can give to the people, that would definitely be.
I'm not saying we don't want to be able to do that. I'm just saying it would be. I'm sure that the people that are brought down here to explain some of this stuff would really appreciate knowing it an hour before they had to be here. So
exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Councilor Erpenbach.
I just wondered, for the benefit of the group, if Councilor Staggers could just make an amendment to that minutes instead of pulling it off so that we could talk about it and amend it, I think, on the consent agenda. That's my question to Attorney Fifesley, and he's nodding his head, so I'm thinking. So we don't have to vote twice, Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay.
We'll have that discussion and we'll figure out the right procedural way to go about it and take care of it. We'll rely on our legal counsel to make sure that it's done properly. And
Thank you.
So, okay. Councilor Anderson Jr.
Just a quick reply back to Councilor Rolfing on this. We had a conversation with leadership a few weeks ago about this also, as far as the consent agenda. And as we look at it also, a lot of this time doesn't come out until Friday afternoon. So, we have maybe the weekend and today to take a look at it and decide if we want to pull those items. We are trying to be as much as we can diligent to do that, but, there does come that time we have to do the city's business, and
right.
So that's, something that has been discussed, and we are looking at trying to make things better on that too.
And I'm going to direct Jim David, our legislative and operations manager, if you would find out who we can get in to advise that. Thank you, Jim. Okay. Other input? Seeing none, we will. Councilor Jamison.
Just want to bring up the awareness to the council tomorrow, 3:30. The Transit Task Force is meeting here in the overflow room. Councilor Anderson, Councilor Rolfing, and I are on that committee or that task force. It's a great group of people, but we're making headway. There's only really going to be intentionally like 5 more meetings counting tomorrow. And we really want to be done and ready to present our findings and support by the council. So we're encouraging any other councilors who've got time to attend. I think it would be informative for all of us. We've just got a few items on the agenda. We've identified some things through the transit coordinated plan, some great action steps for us. So we'll be working through them, and there'll be public input. We had a great turnout last time. Just wanted to invite all the rest of the councilors to attend.
Definitely a critical item before us for going to affect us for a long time. Thank you for your work on that. Councilor Rolfing.
I just wanted to add as co-chair that the people seem to be really excited about participating and being on this committee, this task force. In fact, just by bringing some together, some different people together, we've had Project Car, who has cars, as you're probably aware, and some of those sit idle at times. And we've had one other group talk to them about using some drivers that they have, so that we've already had some success that is happening, and we're going to try and continue to build on that. We should be, as Councilor Jameson said, it should move forward fairly quickly.
Good, good. Thank you. Councilor Anderson Jr.
I just noticed there's a slight conflict on this too, as we also have a CCOG board meeting tomorrow afternoon. I don't know if we can have maybe a couple of our alternates help us out on that or something. Aren't both of us on CCOG, or?
Kenny is.
Councilor Aguilar?
I have a conflict with CCOG tomorrow too, so.
At 4 o'clock.
At 4 o'clock, I have another meeting for the city at 4 also, so I wasn't going to be able to attend more than a half an hour of the transit meeting, and I was going to have to choose between CCOG and the other meeting that.
Maybe we can give Lynn a call and make sure they have a forum or
Quorum?
Quorum, and we can miss a meeting.
Do we have alternates, or do we have them identified? Jim David, okay. Okay.
Kenny, it's a CCOG meeting, and for the term of August 2013 to August 2014 is Kenny Anderson Jr., Sue Aguilar, and Jim David.
Okay. So Jim David looks like he may be the only one in attendance for that. So, okay. Well, let's call CCOG and make sure that we're going to be okay with the quorum. So, okay. Good input. Anything else? Councilor? No? Okay. We're going to have two presentations today. A few weeks ago, we had one of our councilors and two of our council staff in Seattle for the National League of Cities conference, and it looks like Councilor Rolfing is going to be the first presentation and tell us what he's bringing back from Seattle.
I'm just counting the pages here. It looks like 7. Rex Rolfing, Councilor at Large here in Sioux Falls. It was a real privilege to be able to go to the National League of National League of Cities meeting in Seattle. Found out that there's a city that is even more liberal, I guess would be a good word, or progressive or something like that in Portland. Everybody says it. Says, we're not bad here. Go to Portland. They're even worse than we are. So it was kind of interesting. Did get to go to the original coffee shop, the original Starbucks, and don't waste your time. It's the coffee's okay, but it's real little, like most of them. But I wanted to go through with you the sessions that I went through, because I thought there were some ones I picked were of interest. First one, breaking down silos between economic development and smart regional planning. Next one, pathway to careers, public-private partnerships to fill skill gaps. As you know, as we all know, we have a problem getting enough people into Sioux Falls here now to take the jobs that we have. The role of elected officials in economic development, as that's been one of my one of the things that I'm interested in around here quite a bit. Next one, supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses. Same kind of path that was going on. Economic development financing. Talked a lot about TIFs and other things that were there. And the last one I went to was called Revving Up the Economic Engine of Small Communities. Now, I'm not going to go through all the things that I've underlined here, because I would take a lot of your time, but just a couple of things if I could. First, the number of deals, if you will, they're talking about deals being bringing a business to Sioux Falls, either new or expanding dramatically, that kind of thing, has been dropping dramatically, just dramatically. Number of deals completed from 98 to 2000 were 13,000. In 2011, that was only through from 10 to 11, that number was only 5,000. So they're just the market is shrinking, if you will. People may be staying a little bit more where they are. That just means that we need to give more ideas. We need to have more ways of bringing people to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and that kind of thing that we have even more than we have now, because there's just not enough. Just not enough. Baby boomers and millennials are the groups that are populating the inner cities. It's not the middle agers. It's people like me, and it's people like my daughter that are going downtown in most of these places. So just a number of other things. They talked about some things that other cities are doing. Let's see here. I just want to hit a couple more, then I'll get out of your hair. The elected officials can influence economic development by connecting the dots via good policy, leadership, and communication of the city's goals. Think about that. That's the ways we can do it. Communication, good policies, and leadership. In other words, we got to be cheerleaders for the city and make sure they have the tools that they need to get it done. Again, there were some things that were good. They talked about one of the people said, Fort Collins, Colorado, said, "Don't go elephant hunting because it's hard to get and they're easy to lose." So in other words, when we get a great big one, if we get our hands on one or whatever, we got to really be careful, because those guys can come in and then 5 years from now they can come in and say, we got a better deal down the road. And they're gone sometimes as fast as they come in. So we got to be careful about that too. So I'm not going to, what I will do is have this at my desk. Any of you would like to take a look at it, you're welcome to do that. Like I said, I have 7 pages worth of notes that I took, and it's typed so you can read my writing. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to go there, and I'll look forward to doing it again sometime, hopefully.
Thank you, Councilor.
Next.
Did anybody, do we want to do questions as we present or at the end?
Sure. Can I ask a question?
Okay.
Of Mr. Rolfing. Rex, I think you're one of the last councilmen to be able to go to National League of Cities. I think everyone else here on the council has actually gone to one. What was your first thoughts when you saw the setup of the National League? And speak about just your experience.
Well,
there.
the experience, I got to meet some people that I probably would never have met before, obviously, from different parts of the country, and they've sent me some things that I thought were interesting in the way they did some things, and I'm going to be very interested in talking to some of our administrators, our department heads, et cetera, about some of the ideas I took away. I think I took away seven different ideas, and I've already started talking to some about that. And whether they'll work or not, I don't know, but it's worth running it by them. And if they work, fine. If they don't, that's fine too. The first thoughts I had, though, some of it was for major cities, but I think they did a pretty good job of bringing it down into smaller communities or smaller cities like Sioux Falls. Even some of the bigger city ideas could be, molded into something that might work here. Otherwise, the organization is very good. A lot of sub meetings going on, if you will, not conferences, but sub meetings. That, of course, I was not interested in being part of the politics of the National League of Cities and becoming part of that organization, if you will, from the standpoint of leadership. So I didn't partake in a lot of that. Otherwise, it was very good. And one other thing, I did get to know our city clerk and our budget analyst a lot better by spending a little bit more time with them in that setting. So that was good.
Thank you.
And speaking of the city clerk, Lori's next to report.
Any other questions for Councilor Rolfing? Okay, Lori Hogstad, city clerk.
All right, thank you. I've broken mine. I attended 5 different sessions, and I've broken them down into the sessions. The first one was energizing communities with social media, which I thought would be really interesting because I love social media, and it just seems like that, it's not going away. We need to learn how to utilize it to the best of our ability. And so there were different participants, and everyone was at different levels. I will say that we're far above many of the cities that were in the group that I was in. and they talked about how social media can affect the quality of life in your community, how citizens might say something on social media that possibly they wouldn't, call up a council member and say in person or relay that to the city. In fact, the gentleman who gave the presentation was a council member in Lenexa, Kansas, and he told about there was an event one night in his city, and he was home and he was checking his Twitter feeds, and he sees a message talking about this very event and how there was a big problem, and this guy said he was never taking his family back again. He was so upset with what was going on. And right away he was able to, get on the phone with someone, resolve the problem, and contacted this individual. And so he just gave some of his experiences on how social media has helped in their city. And I was just looking at what we have in Sioux Falls, and we have a YouTube channel, which I just found out today, that we have 401 videos available on our YouTube channel. And those range from our different news conferences that we have in Sioux Falls all the way to our Inside Town Hall videos are on there as well. Of course, Sioux Falls has a Facebook page. We don't have a lot of followers on Facebook, but Twitter seems to be the big thing. We have about 5,500 followers, and just a range of issues that are talked about on Twitter, everything from the downtown parking to street construction updates, event center updates. There's been a dog bite in a certain neighborhood. Can you please be on the lookout for this certain dog? Career opportunities, if you want to be involved with downtown, development and vision, live well, and even what I think is a neat one, the text alert for snow. And so my takeaway from that was, how could I utilize social media for elections? And I was thinking about, Facebook and Twitter, and what I learned, and I actually, when I got back, sat down with my son and daughter-in-law for a little lesson on Twitter, and they got me all up to speed. Which is, those are going to be our future leaders and our citizens, and that's what they use. They use the social media. And I thought, it'd be kind of neat to be able to put out there, see our sample ballot, and you can have a link and they can go to that link, or, the last day to register to vote for our city election is this date, on the election day, be sure and get out and vote, really push the vote centers and that type of thing. So I talked to Brett Matheson, and he gave me the contact that I need to work with as far as getting some Twitter feeds out there and Facebook information out on our city site. So that was a good takeaway from that. Another one I attended was making your city more business friendly. I looked at this from the aspect of, business licensing that we do and alcohol licensing and that type of thing, but it was much larger than that. They had different representatives from their communities, and they talked about their strategies to retain businesses as well as to entice businesses to come into their cities. We had the mayor of Greenville, South Carolina, and she was telling us they have a business incentive program, and when businesses hit certain anniversary dates, for instance, if you've been in the city for 10 years, then you get cash payment, like a reward for staying in the city that long. And I think in some of these cities, I can't see that we would need to do that, but there's some cities where there's so many communities, and each one has so much to offer that they really almost have to come up with some kind of incentives to keep the businesses or to entice them to come to their community. And so they talked a lot about public-private partnerships, setting up business advocacy groups. And I think we're going the right direction with what I think about as businesses as our, one-stop shop for people that need licensing and that type of thing. And I thought it would fall more in that range, and it was actually a lot bigger picture. Another one, aging and a shared community vision. And Rex talked a little bit about baby boomers, the group between 46 and 1964, and I will say I'm one of those. And we're either all right now an older adult or a future older adult. And there's a silver tsunami coming. This is the way they worded it. And we think about development, of course, having affordable housing, commercial development, planned residential neighborhoods, but this was really interesting because they talked about all of us and the baby boomers that we take a whole different approach to things like holistic, living. We're looking for housing, employment, healthcare, career opportunities, and we want to sustain ourselves spiritually, medically, educationally, and culturally. And many people want to just stay at home and don't really want to move somewhere else. But one kind of neat thing that that one community talked about is they started incorporating what they called senior housing, which there has to be a better term, but on college campuses. And the baby boomers mix in with the millennials, and I thought, I could see myself doing that and mentoring some of the college students, and helping with things, or it just would be kind of a neat idea to. And of course, all the transportation needs would be there. Generally, the colleges or universities are in the central part of the city where they do have the transportation and the restaurants and the services. So I thought that was a neat idea. And then the next one I went to was the Suburbanization of Poverty, Local Challenges and Regional Solutions. The speakers and attendees at this session all had two key issues in their communities, and that was affordable housing and code enforcement. And in fact, they asked, raise your hand if you have code enforcement issues in your community, and every single person was shaking their head, raising their hand. It's nothing new. And it was interesting because they talked about that many citizens, you're doing well in your life and your business, and you're ready to move up. You're ready to move out of that mid-century home, a home that might be 50 or 60 years old, and move into a new community. And then someone moves into your home, but due to a number of factors in their lives, they can afford the payment, but they can't quite afford the upkeep. And then pretty soon these neighborhoods of homes from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s fall into disrepair, and it just followed a pattern of moving out into the suburbs into more expensive homes, but then the parts of the city that have the older homes fall into disrepair. And that's due to, just so many things. And they talked about foreclosure problems in different cities and so on. And they also mentioned that the number of dollars to confront poverty is very limited. I thought this would focus a little bit more on homelessness, but it really focused on poverty in suburban America. And they talked about the different federal programs, and none of those programs really seem to work together, but the things they look at are housing, food assistance, social services, health, economic development, education, and job training. We had an interesting speaker there. He was from the Brookings Institute out of Washington, D.C., and he had co-authored a book called Confronting Suburban Poverty in America. And while he was speaking, I brought my Nook along, and I pulled up the book and was able to look at it. And he was talking about the new reality of metropolitan poverty, and integrating services and deliveries, and how collaboration really needs to take place across sectors and jurisdictions. So that was really interesting to me to learn a little bit more. And again, I was surprised by the context. I thought it would be more on the homelessness issue, which is huge in Seattle, but it really focused more on just our neighborhoods, the working poor in our neighborhoods. And then the last one, this was actually probably my favorite part of the conference, was I went on a walking tour of the South Lake Union neighborhood. And this tour, or the South Union Lake neighborhood, is adjacent to downtown Seattle. And this whole neighborhood fell into terrible disrepair. And people had businesses there, but nobody knew was going in, and they were really struggling with what to do with this neighborhood. Well, their city planners began looking at this, and their city planner was there, and also several council members were there from Seattle, so that was really great. In fact, the one that gave us the biggest presentation, he's the one that ended up getting defeated. He was in a heated race at the time and got beat by a socialist opponent, and so he was really on his last part of his time with the council, but very informational. In fact, what they do on their council is they each take a certain topic, and they work with that all the way from the beginning to the end, from when an item is introduced to the council to the end. It's like they're each in charge of certain items, and this was his item. Some of these names might be familiar to you, and Seattle has these people to thank. Paul Allen with Microsoft, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, of course Bill Gates, also Microsoft and the Gates Foundation, and then Larry Page with Google. And these companies are all instrumental to Seattle. In fact, they've got 4 huge philanthropists in their city that help them with many, many things. But it was interesting because we started out at the office of this Vulcan Real Estate, and they had this this 3D model of the entire city of Seattle. It was really cool. And so that you could see the downtown and where this South Lake Union neighborhood was. And then they had different lights that went on, and it would show you, you know, different streets, and they would light up the buildings that had been, you know, rehabbed and reconstructed and so on. But finally, someone asked, well, who owns this Vulcan real estate? Because they'd purchased at that point about 5 million, let's see, how many was it? 5 million square feet of property. Well, come to find out, Vulcan Real Estate is owned by Paul Allen of Microsoft. And when you look at, if you look up Vulcan.com, the website, I mean, he's involved in everything from biomedical to aerospace to real estate, oil, you name it. But anyway, they bought up a lot of properties because they'd heard about this plan. And then they began to work on the rezoning of the property because they wanted to build in different incentives, and this might be getting a little long, but this is really interesting. So it took about a year to rezone this huge neighborhood, and the rezoning was complete. Of course, they had neighborhood meetings, and for the most part, the neighbors were supportive. They just felt like big business was taking over. Well, it was. I mean, thanks to big business, the city is what it is. So it was a little bit taking over, but what they did is they have a diverse mix of housing and employment. They have a lot of safe pedestrian areas, and they created new infrastructure with affordable housing incentives. For instance, if a business added affordable housing, they could then gain more floor space and more height to their building. Otherwise, there was a certain standard. But if they agreed to do so much affordable housing, they could go up and out with their building. And the other thing that they did is, and just by doing that, they generated $45 million for their affordable housing program and $27 million in new infrastructure investments. And that will support 12,000 new households and 20,000 jobs over the next 10 years or 20 years. And the other incentive they allowed businesses to purchase conservation easements to farmland just outside of Seattle. They have a lot of farmland outside of Seattle. They want to keep it that way. And so if they would purchase a certain amount of easements, then that would also give them the opportunity to expand out and up with their businesses. Another interesting thing, they had one parking spot for every 1,000 square feet of business space, of space. And you know, I didn't see any parking ramps or hardly any parking spots, but they said they don't need it. You know, a lot of the people that work at Amazon downtown, they walk, they don't even own a driver's license. They walk everywhere. And they have this neat little thing called the zip car, and you pay by the month. And let's say you have an appointment in whatever, Tacoma, you need to get out of the city. You go online, you sign out a zip car for the day. You have a little, like a debit card. You walk up to the car, they tell you where it is. You scan it, it unlocks the car, it's full of gas. You get in it, you drive it to your appointment, you bring it back, park it in the same spot, and get out, and it locks, and you've had your transportation for the day. Plus, they have great transportation there. But these zip cars were neat. You could see them all over. So I was glad they shared with us what those did. Let's see. Oh, and on the walking tour, one of the council members went with us, and it was fun. I always try to kind of keep up with her because she, you know, we'd stop and they'd talk about certain things, but she would say, you know, as we were walking, she'd point things out and talk about things in this neighborhood that, you know, she was part of and knew a lot about. So it was great to have her along. Amazon is an example. They're expanding. They're adding three city blocks worth of buildings downtown, and you know they're really ramping up things. I don't know if you saw the report on the news last night about them, but with their supposedly drone deliveries and how all that works. But they're adding 3 huge developments, so they will have a total of 7 million square feet in this neighborhood. And instead of moving out like a lot of businesses do, oh, it's really getting crowded. We need more room. Let's go out. They wanted to stay downtown because their employees love it. They can live there, walk to work, walk to the restaurants, walk to the stores, and everything's there that they need. The Gates Foundation has a big development in this neighborhood for their many, many businesses. Google does a lot of their product development in Seattle. It's not their headquarters, but they do quite a bit of product development. And then last but not least, this I thought was kind of neat. There were a lot of buildings that shared businesses, residential, and like what I would call commercial storefronts, you know, that the public would go into. And the way that they weren't really alleyways. They would kind of have walkways between buildings. And on the street side where you would be driving by, they only had the commercial development entrances and signs there. So if you actually lived in that building, your entrance would be in that walkway, because really you didn't need signage for that. You knew where you were going in the businesses. So they utilized the square footage they had on, on the street side for those businesses that hopefully people drove by and would decide to stop. So they really have done a huge job. We talked with one of the architects that helped design a lot of the buildings down there. He was on the tour as well and pointed out some really, really amazing things with some of the buildings, and of course LEED certified and all that, that they do there as well. So I could go on and on, but I better stop. Any questions?
Questions for Lori? Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Lori. I'm interested in the suburban poverty one that you attended.
Yes.
I'm involved with a study right now with a community organization, and we're watching, put in this little plug for this documentary that we're going to watch called The Line.
Oh.
And it's about the poverty line, and they're talking about suburban poverty growing astronomically.
Yes.
Core cities are being gentrified by whoever, but the suburbs all across the country. So you mentioned a book, Confronting Suburban Poverty in America. What's the author on that one?
You know what? I did not write his name down, but I have it at my desk, so I will send that to you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for your report.
You bet.
Councilor Anderson Jr.
Lori, I thought it was interesting when you were talking about the social networking options and that, and how the city hasn't really, we've started to, but really haven't utilized some of those social networks to really get out to the neighborhood, to the community, especially the younger people in the city. And I guess my question on this would be, who runs our Facebook page within the city?
You know what, that's a really good question, and I was thinking of that today because I thought I needed to find out who I talked to about, talking to them about Twitter, and I looked online. I couldn't find anything specifically, but I did talk to Brett Matheson, who is I don't know his exact title, but he's over the web department, and he suggested that I speak to our webmaster. And so I'm going to set up a time to sit down with her and just talk about the election items. And, obviously I wouldn't be posting them. They would need to post them because they'd want to look and make sure what you're putting out there. But a lot of departments utilize them. I know Public Works has a lot of stuff out there, police departments. So obviously some departments are using them, but I really never thought about sending out Twitter feeds or, maybe Facebook. I think of the city's website, but I tend to forget about those other obvious things that we can use. And I know having kids that are the age of millennials, that's what they look at. They're always looking at Twitter and their Twitter feeds and Facebook and seeing what's new and up to date. And so, I guess we need to evolve to be able to include that as part of our advertising, so to speak.
I think that's a challenge for the city to take that on. Just as Councilman Rolfing was talking about in his presentation, we're always looking at ways to try to interest people into moving into here to Sioux Falls. Well, here we put a lot of information out on our website. Why shouldn't that information be mirrored on our Facebook page? The job listings, things like that, where people can see them at a national level, other than just, our little area here.
You bet. Yep.
And a lot of times I know that, just as a comment to that, Councilor Anderson, I'm sure a lot of our followers on Facebook are probably Sioux Falls people, but if there is something posted, that gets shared and that goes, it just mushrooms out. And I think it'd be, if we don't have somebody that follows our Facebook or Twitter, that we should have somebody that could, give a heads up, or if there is a problem or an issue that needs to be addressed, that it could be looked at. So
you bet.
I hope that, Lori, you can come back to us in a few weeks and give us an update on, maybe the administration's plans, or, maybe we have to take a look at it as a council. But I think it's something that it's a challenge, but I think it's something that we could definitely do well in.
Yeah, I think so too. I was a little leery of the Twitter and everything, but really, once you kind of get acclimated to it, and I had my lessons, it's really pretty easy and easy to find your way around, and you can choose how often you want to get the updates and so on. I just thought they'd be flashing across my phone all the time, and I thought, how does anybody get anything done? But you can set your settings how you choose and which updates you wish to receive. And yeah, I think it's kind of, I'll talk to the team in the webmaster's office and then bring back some information.
That would be great. Thank you. Anything else? We have one more presentation on this from Dave Bixler, our financial analyst.
Dave Bixler, council staff. My presentation won't be nowhere near as long. So I went to 4 different sessions while I was out there, and the one that I went to that I think had the most impact was priority-based budgeting. And so that is what I'm going to report on from when I was out there. The priority-based budgeting, their catchphrase is using a unique lens to focus community resources on results. There's 2 founders, John Johnson and Chris Fabian, and they created the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting in 2010 in reaction to the 2008 financial crisis. Priority-based budgeting methodology is a methodology to determine what degree programs are consuming resources and a means to measure and answer, do these results align with the public's expectations? Currently, there are 40 communities that are being served: Blue Ash, Ohio, Chesapeake, Virginia, Sacramento, California, Cincinnati, Ohio. There's a number of different sized communities that are being served with this program. Throughout the presentation, it was a 2-day presentation, and throughout there was always this underlying tone of managing through financial difficulties. All these communities are facing financial challenges since 2008. And the common theme seems to be that several communities are facing cutting core services and furloughing staff in an effort to balance the budget. Key to the program's success is to understand what drives revenue streams and leverage these limited resources to provide government services. I believe communities can use these concepts regardless of their financial condition, and I intend to incorporate some of those into my financial analysis and reporting, as well as using it during our budgeting process. 3 goals to achieve financial wellness are to incorporate economic analysis into long-term decision-making, measure true costs of doing business, and understand variances. And I think understand variances is a key that we could really focus on. Some of the steps to take is to differentiate between one-time and ongoing revenue sources. Ongoing revenue sources, examples would be sales and use tax and property tax, where one-time examples would be Operation Timber Strike reimbursement from FEMA, the Corps of Engineer funds, grants, contributions. We have matching funds from the zoo for capital programs. Just to give you an idea, from January through October 2013, our general fund revenues are up 12% compared to the same time frame in 2012. Of that, 5.1 million is related strictly to Operation Timber Strike. Segregating these revenue sources provides perspective on ongoing operations. It illustrates the fiscal strength, but not relying on those one-time revenue infusions. It also illustrates the ability to sustain or identify potential shortfalls. Every year there's going to be those one-time events, and it just depends on to what degree they are. But I think it's key that we note those as we look at trend analysis year over year, that we can explain why we're seeing certain levels of growth. Understanding variances. We need to measure variances for both revenues and expenses. We need to compare actual to budget with and without the one-time occurrences, and also compare budgeted initiatives to those that were accomplished. The Center for Priority-Based Budgeting builds on previous methodologies in municipal financial arena, such as budgeting for outcomes. Priority-based budgeting is similar to activity-based budgeting, cost management systems. They're all a resource tracking model in some fashion. The challenges I see with these are the cost of not only implementation and maintaining, but also as well as interpreting the results. And also the timeliness. Are the results available for the decision makers when it's most critical. And another item that I think that is more prudent to the public than in the private sector is the turnover. Decision makers change. And do the core government services level of importance change from administration to administration? The Center for Priority-Based Budgeting website provides a forum to exchange ideas. I will continue to visit the site periodically for suggestions to incorporate into my reporting to the council.
Questions for Mr. Bixler? Just one, I guess, Dave, from my perspective, with the priority-based budgeting, how big of a drastic of a change would that be from what we currently do? Would it be very significant?
It would be very significant. It would require a lot of setup time to determine what are the activities and how do we measure those activities. And I think that from what I witnessed, most of the communities are in a financial dire straits, and they're using this to determine what are the core services that they must deliver and that they can.
Based on that, then, and fortunately, and that's one thing I gained from, Councilor Anderson asked the question, what did you gain from going to this convention? And one thing that really stood out for me was we're really in great shape here in Sioux Falls. We don't have the issues that maybe a lot of other communities have. Would it still be appropriate for us when we're maybe not in the dire straits financially that like some of these other communities are?
I've really found benefit going, and actually I think it built on from going last year. The one thing I will say too is that this year's convention was a lot better scheduled. We had training sessions in the upfront rather than towards the end, and it was very clear what time the programs were and things like that, as opposed to when we were in Boston. And the other thing that I think that we should address is the timing of scheduling us to go, or who is going to go. There are a lot of things that they have, a lot of seminars and things like that get filled pretty quick if you're not on the spot. And so there's some of those benefits that we could also achieve or realize if we were a little bit quicker on the trigger.
Okay. Councilor Erpenbach.
I just wanted to add, go back to the priority-based budgeting. That was a conversation a previous council had in the Munson administration. They didn't call it priority-based, they call it outcome-based budgeting. Budgeting for outcomes. And it was a huge conversation in terms of how do we want to build that budget based on what do we want to see happen, rather than going at it the way that we do in terms of, okay, we've got X number of dollars and here's how we're going to spend it. You start the other direction, and I think there's some real value in this. I think this is a conversation we need to continue to have. Whether we're in dire straits or not, what do we really want to accomplish? If we're the policy setting and appropriating body of this community, what do we want to do with that? What do we want to come out of this? And that's what you're talking about. Priorities. What's our priority? Keep at it, buddy.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
And in our discussions before you guys left, I did make a suggestion that you try to enjoy some of the local flavor of Seattle. Were you able to take Councilman Raufling out anywhere and let him enjoy some of the local flavor?
We were able to enjoy some of the local establishments without incident.
Always good to hear. Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Very good information, and I think very well worth our city and our community to be members of the National League of Cities. It is a great organization, and we do gain a lot from it. Next presentation will be Mr. Bob Capel, our Big Sioux River surface water quality update. And is this an annual or semi-annual?
Based upon request.
Wow.
So, good afternoon, Chairman Karski and councilors. I appreciate the opportunity to come today to talk about the water quality of Big Sioux River. I was asked to give a presentation to the council and to the public a little bit about where we're at, where we've been, and what we're doing to improve the water quality in the Big Sioux River. With me today with my team is Matthew Gedney from the Environmental Division and Trent Lubers from the Public Works Administration. So again, my name is Bob Capel with Public Works and Environmental, and we'll be touching base on this presentation and open to any questions that you have. So first of all, the South Dakota DNR has classified the Big Sioux River as an impaired water body. It is the state of South Dakota first is responsible for assigning the designated uses to a water body. You first have to know what the purpose of the water body. So the state has assigned different uses of the Big Sioux River. And then they establish water quality standards that basically protect that designated use. And because of that, then the state must go through every 2 years for the EPA and assess every water body in the state and determine, is it meeting those water quality standards? Currently, the Big Sioux River is not, and it's not meeting the standards for two pollutants, sediment and bacteria. I just want to share with everybody we've come a long way on the Big Sioux River, but obviously we still need to go a long way to bring it into compliance with the state's water quality standards. Just a little background, currently those two impairments, there used to be a lot more impairments to the Big Sioux River. It used to be impaired for ammonia. It used to be impaired for dissolved oxygen. It used to be impaired for iron. If you go back long enough before they even did impairments, it was in a lot worse shape than it is right now. So we are getting there, but we need to continue to make improvements. Big question is, why is the river still impaired? We've invested millions and millions of dollars to basically try and bring the water, the Big Sioux River, into compliance with the state standards, and it's not. The major reasons are there's significant increased pressures on this Big Sioux River watershed from urban and agricultural. And I'd like to kind of just paint a little picture here. You know, we've got a bigger problem than a lot of places. The Big Sioux River is a fairly small watershed. It's a fairly small water body when you look at rivers around the United States. Even here in South Dakota, we look at Big Sioux River versus the Missouri River. The Big Sioux River right now is probably, I couldn't get real data because the river's frozen over, so the USGS gauging stations aren't there. It's probably running anywhere from 100 to 500 cubic feet per second. The Missouri River on the same avenue, down by Yankton, is running around 13,000 cubic feet per second. So we're only about 1% of the flow of the Missouri River right here in South Dakota in comparison. And then you look at those watersheds, and what a big difference. What are the three major cities on the Big Sioux River watershed? Sioux Falls, Watertown, Brookings. What are the three major urban centers on the Missouri River in South Dakota? Vermilion, Yankton, Pierre. None of those cities even come to the smallest urban center on the Big Sioux River. You look at the uses of urban agriculture in the Big Sioux River versus the Missouri River, huge stressors compared to each other. The Big Sioux River has a much higher intensity in agriculture. We all see the value of land right now. We see the value of commodities. We see farmers as businessmen doing more and more crop production, more and more livestock production. So the Big Sioux River has tremendous stressors on it compared to other water bodies. So we've got probably some other problems that some watersheds don't have. But the same respect is, I just want to make sure you paint that picture. We've got some big challenges. We're not there yet, but the city is really doing their part to try and help improve these situations. Another issue is that there's been increased monitoring, just like anything else, like you deal with crime. Sometimes you see peaks in crime. Is there an peak in crime, or is it just an increase in reporting? We basically are doing a lot more monitoring of the watershed than we used to. And when you do more monitoring, you have more data, you find more problems. That's usually the case based on past history. There's improved South Dakota assessments. The state of South Dakota has improved how they assess the water bodies. They've become much more aggressive in assessing them. And just this is the first time they're going through, and they used to just evaluate based on one sample point in a reach of the river. Now they're taking a look at any sample point within that reach to evaluate the quality of the river. So a lot of changes are being made. 4 years ago, the state of South Dakota really didn't look at the chronic criteria on a lot of these pollutants. Now they are. So The assessments are better, the monitoring is more, and that's one of the reasons why it's just showing us maybe it was there before that we just didn't see. And the last is public complacency, and this is my personal opinion. I mean, when the Clean Water Act came out in 1972, there was a lot of energy and a lot of excitement in the public to basically clean up our waterways. You know, came out and said we want every waterway in the United States fishable and swimmable. Well, I don't know if we'll ever get there, but there was that excitement and desire to be there. And I think over 40 years, we've kind of lost a little of that excitement and desire. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what the city has done for water quality. We manage a major sanitary wastewater program and treatment system. We manage a comprehensive stormwater program. We manage an extensive monitoring program that I've talked about. And we are also becoming very active in watershed partnerships, which we were not that active in the past. First, just a little summary on the sanitary wastewater system. The mission of that system is to collect and treat wastewater to a higher quality than the state water quality criteria and the permitted limits at all times. Some of the things I just want to share with you about our sanitary sewer system is that there's over 800 miles of sanitary sewers in the city of Sioux Falls. That's a lot of miles of sewers that our system we maintain. Our wastewater treatment plant receives over 15 million gallons of wastewater flow every day that we treat from our community. We have water professionals that run that water reclamation system 24/7, just like our law enforcement, just like our Sioux Falls Fire and Rescue. There's professionals that are out there making sure the sewers are working like they're supposed to and treating that wastewater to protect the river 24/7, 365 days a year. Just as a summary, we spend over $10 million every year just for the operation and maintenance of that wastewater treatment plant, a significant investment by the city. So, and then ultimately, we spend all that money, we do all that work, what does it do for us? This is just a graph that summarizes how well our treatment facility works. These are the 5 top parameters we kind of look at from what we discharge to the river. Biochemical oxygen demand. Our influent that comes into the wastewater treatment plant is 242. On average, what goes out is 4, a greater than 98% removal of BOD. Excellent performance. Not a lot of wastewater treatment plants can say that in the country. And you just go down the line, total spent solids. We have over a 98% removal of total spent solids in our treatment system. Total nitrogen, we have over a 93% removal of total nitrogen. Ammonia nitrogen, we have greater than a 99% removal efficiency. And then E. coli bacteria, which we will be talking about a lot in the Big Sioux River, we have over a greater than a 99% removal of bacteria from the sanitary sewer collection system. So great performance by a bunch of great professionals that work for our water reclamation treatment division and collection system. The stormwater management program. The city of Sioux Falls is mandated by a permit to basically develop and operate a major comprehensive stormwater management plan. We also have what we call a municipal separate storm sewer system. What that means is the Sioux Falls does not have combined sewers. All storm sewer is collected separately, all sanitary sewer is collected separately, and they divert it to different waste streams. One goes to the wastewater treatment plant, sanitary waste, stormwater is collected by storm sewer systems, and then discharged to the Big Sioux River. Some of the key components of that stormwater program is there is a commercial residential program. This program, I won't be able to speak to a lot about it, but it's generally regulated under Chapter 11 of the Engineering Design Standards. This is where our design standards basically control the development community for new development and redevelopment within our community. What we're trying to do is basically set some standards out there that when we design new developments and redevelopment, we are thinking about stormwater quality. What is going to run off of that development after construction is completed? And that's what that component of the program is for. We have a major construction site program. This is the program that regulates all of our construction and development industry when they're doing construction within our community. And we've had a fair amount compared to most cities throughout the country. Just for example, I think we do over 2 to 3,000 inspections a year of construction sites within the city of Sioux Falls to make sure they are complying with our Chapter 12 engineering design standards, to make sure they're not allowing erosion and sediment to discharge from their sites into the Big Sioux River. We have an industrial facility program. This is where we basically assist the state and identify companies that may need a stormwater permit that don't have one. We also go out and inspect industries that are supposed to have a stormwater permit to make sure they're complying with it. We have an illicit discharge management program. This is where we are out there trying to find where there's illicit discharges, where maybe somebody intentionally is discharging something to the storm sewer or just an unintentional discharge. We have our monitoring program that we're required to. We go out and monitor the Big Sioux River when there's rain events to see what the quality of the Big Sioux River is, what's the quality of our outfalls from our storm sewer system. We have a municipal facility runoff control program where we basically go out and ensure that all our city facilities don't have materials and waste that are washing off their facilities during a precipitation event. And then ultimately the last is a public education program, and a lot of you probably have seen our curb marker program where it says, you know, please don't dump, it goes into our school, those out on the curb markers, curb inlets throughout the city. Talk a little bit about our environmental monitoring program. We have a very extensive and aggressive program that I'd like to talk to you about today. We just launched this year. We wanted to be much more transparent with our information. So if you go to the Sioux Falls environmental website, you're going to see in that website that we are now showing through a graphic display what the pollutant levels are for 3 major pollutants: dissolved oxygen, total spent solids, and E. coli bacteria. And this map here, if you go to that website and you'd open it up, you're going to see we basically have 4 river monitoring sites in Skunk Creek that we monitor twice a week from the Environmental Division. And I'm going to show you some of the data from Timberline Avenue. As an example, you go there, it's interactive, you click what site you want to look at, and here's an example of the dissolved oxygen data recently on the Big Sioux River at Timberline Avenue. The red line there is basically the state standard. It's 5 milligrams per liter dissolved oxygen, and as you can see, the dissolved oxygen levels are very good. We generally are above the water quality standard for dissolved oxygen, and that's a really good indicator. Any stream that's really struggling, you're going to see dissolved oxygen be a stressor. I'd like to take a look now at the historical levels for bacteria, the biggest pollutant of concern for our community and this watershed. If you pop this open, this is the historical data since June of 2012 till the end of October, and we update these graphs on a monthly basis when we come at the end of each month. If you can take a look, the red line again there is the state water quality standard for discharges of bacteria on a daily basis, which is 258 colonies per 100 milliliters of sample. And you just take a look at that, about half the samples are below state water quality standards and about half are above. So that's a huge area that we need to make improvements on as we move forward to try and bring the bacteria levels into Big Sioux River down below that red line. So, and technically, somebody could swim in that river as it was designated for immersion recreation. I don't know if we'll ever get there in my career, but we are trying our best to get to that point. So if you're interested, you're welcome to do that. We have shared that information with the public. We've had a lot of good feedback from the public about putting that information out there. Instead of sticking it in a book in somebody's office, it's very important for us to get some good local advocates along with us to help us solve this problem. And that's where we're at now is watershed partnerships. We cannot solve this problem alone. City of Sioux Falls, first place, we're not responsible for solving this problem alone. And just some of the things that we have done is the state of South Dakota was supposed to do TMDLs. These are total maximum daily loads for the TSS and bacteria on the Big Sioux River for about 10 years. The city of Sioux Falls stepped up and volunteered to be the third-party lead to make sure these TMDLs got done. They were completed at the end of last year. We created 4 TMDLs for the 4 reaches of the river that connect to the Big Sioux Falls for total spent solids and bacteria. And it was a really successful situation. And bottom line, the TMDLs really taught us something, that our storm sewer system is doing a really good job of managing sediment from our community. Our construction site program, we're keeping sediment out of the river, but bacteria, we're not doing as good a job as we thought we were. So some of the other watershed partnerships, about 3 years ago or so, I personally brought in a lot of watershed professionals from the Big Sioux River, and we met in our library, and we really sat down and said, how can we solve this problem together? And successfully, we developed what is called the Central Big Sioux River Watershed Coalition. It has a lot of members in it. There's several funding partners like City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the South Dakota Conservation Districts, East Dakota Water Development District, and then there's other stakeholders and partners in that watershed coalition that are working together to solve this problem in a collaborative manner. It's a really a success story. I think we're really making headways moving forward to tackling the problem together. What we did is, I personally did not want Sioux Falls to lead this association because history has taught me that there's a lot of resentment between the ag community and Big Sioux Falls and small town Big Sioux Falls, and we really felt it was wise not to take the lead. So we reached out and said we want to be a strong partner, but we wanted somebody else to take the lead in that watershed coalition. Moody County Conservation District did take that leadership role, and we have basically entered into a joint powers agreement with them. That we're working with them. We are sending some of our funding to that coalition to assist them in doing things out in the watershed to improve the water quality. And it's, like I said, I think it's really a truly a success story. So what more can we do? Basically, we really feel it's important to educate the public and develop local advocates. I think it's really been proven that government alone cannot solve these problems. We really need the buy-in and the partnership with local advocates. And I really truly believe we're getting some strong local advocates in our area that we haven't had before. And it's always been my philosophy is to bring citizens and other organizations like environmental NGOs to the table with us to work with us versus to work against them. Where they've tried that around the country, it's failed. They are not achieving improving water quality, and they're just spending a lot of money on legal fees. So our goal is to basically work with our citizens, work with other organizations in a partnership, collaborative manner together to solve this problem instead of fighting about the problem and not doing anything. An example that we did to develop these partnerships, this year was the first inaugural Mayor's Big Sioux River Water Summit. I'm very pleased and very thankful for Mayor to bring this idea up, and we ran with it this year, and it was a tremendous success story. We reached out and we had tremendous interest in it, a lot more than I ever expected. We had stakeholders from around the watershed come. We had other mayors come to the City of Sioux Falls at the Orpheum Theater. We had over 135 attendees at this water summit. I do remember seeing Councilor Rolfing sitting in one of my presentations, so thank you for coming there. And we had educational booths, we had 13 water presentations, and we had the mayor's question and answer panel that was very nice. A lot of good questions, a lot of good feedback, a lot of good energy and synergy was developed. And these are just a few pictures from the summit that are on the website. The upper left is this picture of the USDA showing their model to show the difference between no-till and tilled soils and infiltration of water. The upper right was the South Dakota Canoe Association, one of the most beautiful kayaks ever seen, built, handmade by that gentleman. And then some pictures in the bottom of SDSU professor giving a presentation about tiled fields and agricultural areas, and then the mayor's question and answer session. It was an extremely fun and successful partnership outreach to the public. So, what are we ongoing water quality efforts? We're going to continue to strengthen the sanitary sewer system. We've talked about that, and you've heard from our public works over the years. We have expended over $45 million, thanks to the council's leadership and direction, to make infrastructure improvements in our sanitary sewer in the last 3 years. That's a major investment that you don't see being done around the country where infrastructure is significantly failing. We are going to continue to strengthen our stormwater program. We're going to also strengthen our watershed partnerships. And we also want to, like I talked about, strengthen those local advocates to work together with us. What are we going to do? We had the water summit. We got feedback from people at the summit. We had some feedback from our stakeholders. And I've met with our administration and our group, and we've come up with some short-term goals that we are going to be looking at trying to tackle here in 2014. We're going to develop a pet waste management program. It is amazing how much that bacteria matter comes from pets and other animals. Matter of fact, it's not just pets. It's the geese population in Sioux Falls has skyrocketed over the last 10 years. How do we address that? You know, they can be a significant source to bacteria into the Big Sioux River. We are going to basically start an annual river greenway cleanup project. Matter of fact, the state of Iowa has, we've been communicating with them, and they're going to do a major river cleanup on the Big Sioux River in 2014. We're going to partner with them, and we're going to try and tag into a cleanup event with Sioux Falls along with their event. Their program has been very successful. It's been like 10 years, and they kind of like a ragbri. They have canoeists and kayaks. It's like people commit a whole week and to come and have like a vacation and clean up a water body. And so we're really excited about that coming in 2014 on the Big Sioux River. We're going to start a water adoption program. We're going to go out there and segment different parts of the river and Koval Lake and other water bodies and try to get businesses or nonprofit organizations to come in and say, hey, we want to adopt that water body and on a routine basis help us try and keep it cleaned up and be little watchdogs for that area, maybe do some monitoring for us. We're going to try and improve our low impact development standards. Currently, well, I'm going to back up. About 10 years ago, the City of Sioux Falls, I would say we're probably on the leading edge dealing with low impact development. Now we're probably not. We need to kind of catch up with the rest of the country. Low impact development or smart growth or green infrastructure, those are all the terminologies that you heard your previous speaker talk about Seattle. They're way ahead of us. These are things basically saying, how can we develop in a more environmentally ecological, safe manner than the way we've done it in the past? Let's not just build bigger pipes. Let's try and get the water to infiltrate into the ground instead of running off with pollutants into the river. The EPA is under a consent order, a fairly significant legal action that we anticipate that they are going to come out with federal rules next year that's going to really drive communities that aren't doing anything in this area. And I truly believe that's going to occur, and it's kind of the way things are leaning is that pretty much I think the way EPA is leaning that everybody will have to try and capture that first inch of rain. In any new development or redevelopment, it has to be designed to capture that first inch of rain and not let it run off the site. Try and get it to pre-development areas. It'll be a major change for our country to do that, but bottom line is we know the impacts from urban are very significant. Riparian area management programs, a water quality component and a flood management control plan. And I just have some slides later, just I talked a little bit about the pet waste program. It's just, you know, we know it's there. It's a dirty job, but like this one, I thought was pretty cute. If you think picking up dog poop is unpleasant, try swimming in it. So the annual River Greenway, we haven't had a formal program for a long time. If some of you remember, there used to be a fairly good aggressive program. The Argus Leader was kind of our lead sponsor, and it was a great program, but it did such a good job that every year the amount of trash and material we picked up started dropping to where there were lower numbers, which was a success. But the story got to be an old news story, and the numbers weren't as good, so the interest was lost. But I think it's time to bring back, to revitalize that interest. So, and this is a picture of my environmental team out there this year, after hours, doing a little cleanup, just trying to do our little part that we can in some of the areas around the Big Sioux River. The water adoption program, these are really good success programs around the country, and we hope it can be a success. The low impact development, just to kind of put it in a capsule here, just a couple pictures, is this is a picture of a parking lot. You know, why build a parking lot with raised medians? Why not build a parking lot with a recessed area where the stormwater can run off the parking lot into a rain garden? We call them porous landscape detentions. The key thing in development is instead of grading properties the way we want them, we want to grade the properties close to the natural ecological way we found them and have more open space and more area for the water to basically infiltrate. And that's really low impact development. The riparian management program, this is what we're really talking about is, in essence, it's really intuitive to the public. What we're trying to do is keep the cows out of the river. Right now, there's no requirement for a farmer to basically keep his cattle out of the river or not have an animal feeding operation right next to the river. And so we're trying to set up a program through this Central Big Sioux River Watershed program where we're going to focus most of our energy on Skunk Creek, because that's where most of the bacteria is coming from, is Skunk Creek Watershed. And we are working with them. Matter of fact, we have a meeting this week. We're trying to develop what we call seasonal riparian area management program, and where we're basically going to offer an incentive to farmers where we will pay them to basically not use that buffer area around the river with cattle operations, farming operations, that type of thing, to basically remove that bacteria source from the river during the recreation season. And that's recreation season is from May through September. So we think it's going to be a successful program. Sounds like we're kind of reaching out what's a reasonable amount of money needs to be spent on it. But you also have to make it enough of an incentive to make it worthwhile to the agricultural community to buy into it. And then one of the things we talked about, the last thing is the water quality short-term goal is we're going to plan to put in a water quality component in our flood management control system. Currently, as you know, we have 2 dams on the Big Sioux River in the city of Sioux Falls that the city manages for flood control. In the past, we've never had a water quality component in that master plan. We're going to develop a water quality component in it. And the reason be that is that, like we talked about, the major source of pollutants that are coming into the Big Sioux River are from Sioux Falls or Skunk Creek. Well, if we reduce the flow through the main channel of the river, from I-90 down to where the diversion channel comes, now we basically are only seeing majority of Skunk Creek water. And that makes the river look a lot dirtier than it is, because we are taking some of the cleaner water that's coming into Sioux Falls and diverting it around. So we're going to try and make sure we have at least a minimum flow through that channel, so it'll help, in essence, you hate to say the word dilute, but in a way we're taking away some fresh water from that one we don't need to. So we're looking forward to that. So, but I'd like to open up for any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our water quality efforts. And there's a lot of things going on nationally that we're going to be working on too. So thank you.
Questions for Mr. Capel. Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Bob, for the presentation. I was unable to attend the Mayor's Water Quality Summit with work obligations, and so it had come up. I'm on the Downtown Advisory Board for the 2025 plan, and the quality of the water in the river came up in that conversation, and that's why this became so interesting to me. And so I guess that's I don't know if I have a question, but I think it's important for us to understand, and what I'm hearing from you too is that we have to do this in a holistic approach.
Correct.
The river's going to be green and ugly downtown until we fix the rest of it all around.
Correct.
Is what you're saying to us.
We
have to make an investment into this.
We cannot just try and clean it alone. Just an example, Councilor Erpenbach, and you're right on target. The Reach 10 of the river from I-90 to where it goes through the core of the city and to where it intersects with the diversion channel down by Morels. In order to meet the bacteria standards, we have to remove 98% of the bacteria to meet that standard. We have a big project ahead of us, and we can't do that alone. Like we said, 50% of that, 45% loading is from Skunk Creek. So if we don't partner with the landowners and the ag community in Skunk Creek, we could do everything. We could remove every single bacteria molecule or whatever, and we're not going to achieve the goal. So we have to deal with the whole watershed, and that's the way it needs to be done. So,
if I might, one more, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask you about I think you made it fairly clear about public complacency. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about, do you have ideas yet for how that might work? I wasn't very old, but I remember those days that led up to the Clean Water Act. Rivers were burning.
Correct.
Rivers were burning. Yep. So people got excited about it. Now, well, yeah, we've got a little poo and a little, sediment. Oh, right. Big deal. How do we get from the oh, big deal attitude to I really want to help?
I think it's public education. I really truly believe that most citizens really want, if they know there's a problem and they know there's something we can do to correct it, they're going to get involved. And I think even in the last couple of years that we've started doing more public outreach, we're seeing a lot of people come to the table that we never had before. We've got some NGOs or non-government organizations that are coming to the table wanting to be involved that we've never seen before. And I think that's a positive thing, because we have a big problem ahead of us, but it's something that can't be resolved if we really put some effort to it. So, in reasonable terms. So, I think public education is a key. And if you saw our float at the Parade of Lights, we did a float where the Big Sioux River, we tried to do a mock-up of the Big Sioux River, and we had a big sign on the back, and it basically said, help clean up the river, pick up your pet waste, and those types of things. And we've had a lot of good feedback from that. So I think we're getting people involved.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Erpenbach. It's two references to the show Dirty Jobs I've heard in one presentation. Councilor Jameson.
Thanks, Bob. Very informative. I would agree. Just a little sum up here. When I went to the League of Cities, what we learned in 2008 was that if you have water or a river running through your city, that you should treat it as liquid gold for the development that will occur around it. Certainly, we spent a lot of money on the River Greenway to try to take advantage of that. So, a couple questions on the process here. First, is the river safe for humans?
To swim in?
Right.
As I stated, it is not. It is impaired for immersion recreation.
Okay.
By the state standards, they basically say, and the thing to remember with the state standards is that if you exceed more than 10% of the time the standard, they consider it impaired. That's how it is determined. So it is impaired, so it is probably not safe to swim in at all times.
Right, that's part of the public awareness. I think Councilor Erpenbach was talking about the rivers burning. I think that's one awareness that most people, I've seen people swimming in it, and I'm like, what are you doing? But I think if more people had learned and knew that they shouldn't be in it, it's not safe for them, it would raise the awareness and the education part that you're talking about. The other part is, okay, so we have the water that enters the city and then leaves the city. What are we responsible for? What are the numbers before it gets it to us, and then what is it after us, and what is our role in all that?
That varies. The way it is right now, the sanitary sewer side, we're in great shape. We completely meet federal regulations. We are improving the water quality of the Big Sioux River from our sanitary side. The storm sewer side, that's where we have to put our next major efforts. We will be responsible. I anticipate we'll be getting a new stormwater permit here in the next year. And there's going to be more expectations from the EPA and the state to basically ensure that what we are discharging from our storm sewer system is not causing impairments to the Big Sioux River. So we're responsible for what is discharged from our sanitary sewers, and we're responsible for what is discharged from our storm sewer systems. That's our responsibility. But we have to be honest that it is unlikely, even if we do 100% success story there, it's not going to get the river where it needs to be. And that's why we're working at it in a watershed scale.
Okay, I get the watershed scale because that is important, and I think participating in that is absolutely important. But all I'm trying to understand is our participation and downstream folks who are having the impact of a city like Sioux Falls on that river. How are we impacting that quality of water?
Example, we are impacting it.
Well, I know, but I mean, how much?
Well, it varies from day to day, month to month, year to year. I'll share this with you. I'll kind of spin it a little bit of a success story. The state of South Dakota has to do a biennial report. They look back the last 5 years of all data on the river. And I have it here, and these are preliminary data. But in 2012, they came out with their biennial report, and that reached 10, that to the core of our city. The E. coli bacteria had an arithmetic mean around 580 colonies of bacteria. And they're doing the report for 2014. Now they're looking again, 2 new years, looking back 5 years. I believe that arithmetic mean looks like it's going to be around 330. So it's improved, and we are making improvements. But the key thing is that according to EPA, you're not there until every single day does not exceed that maximum daily load that's been established for that river. So we are making improvements. We still have a long way to go, but I'm confident that this is probably the most confident and optimistic I've been since my career that we're going to make some significant improvements. So,
good, thanks.
Councilor Staggers?
Yes, Bob. I think probably when people think of water quality, they think about when they're walking along the Big Sioux River and things like that, and especially now with the Greenway, more and more people are going to be doing that. And then, of course, as they're walking along the Greenway, they look at the river, and it is bad. So my question is, I understand, we have to deal with the whole watershed and so forth to deal with this issue, but why couldn't we deal with a kind of a mini project of trying to somehow improve the water downtown along the Greenway where people are walking and where maybe we could have more canoes and kayaks and more recreational things. But at the same time, of course, still striving to work on the larger watershed itself.
Mm-hmm. I think the key thing to remember, Councilor Staggers, it's a great question. That water that's going by our downtown right now is not water that's generated from Sioux Falls.
Right.
It's coming from upstream from us. And when that water column comes through, it would be totally impractical and feasible to treat that whole river water. It would be impractical. The only way you're going to solve these kind of problems of these types of pollutant natures is to stop the pollutants at their source. It's impossible to go and take a river like the Big Sioux River and treat it so it's clean when it goes through. There's things you can do. Yeah. I mean, you can put trash racks in. Some communities do that. City of Los Angeles has a total maximum daily load on them for trash. And they're estimating it's going to cost them $1 billion to implement that TMDL for trash in the LA basin. So there's things you can do that take trash out of the river to collect it, those types of things. But the pollutants like bacteria and sediment, we need to make those improvements at the source.
But for example, like one area with sediment, I mean, some people have mentioned that, hey, we could just put in small dams upriver from the downtown area to collect that sediment. So that would be one important area where we would be eliminating a pollutant. Something like that. I know we're not going to have a water plant on the Big Sioux River just above the downtown, and we're going to clean all that water. No, I know that. Yeah, but these other little things we can maybe do.
Those things do happen. I mean, the dam up by 60th Street North, it silts in. Yeah, and what is it doing? It slows the water down, sediment settles in it, and it silts in. But again, is it cheaper to try and remove the sediment before it gets in the river, or clean it out of that dam, or build dams and those types of things? And it's usually most economical to remove it from the source. And those are options that the city can consider doing other dams. But in this day and age, environmentally, it's pretty difficult to put dams in water bodies. But it's an option that could be considered, but it's not really a treatment scheme. A dam will do some treatment, just like you go down to Lewis and Clark Dam, Lewis and Clark Lake or Gavs Point Dam, is silting in from Niobrara all the way up to Yankton almost because of it's collecting that sediment because the water slows down. So it does treat. It isn't designed to treat, but it does treat.
Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Just to continue along the lines of Councilor Staggers, Bob, what little things could we do to make the river more attractive downtown? And let's just say, the kayaking has been between like 57th and Western or Louise to the downtown. What things could we do as a city to make that stretch more attractive to citizens for their usage? I think that's what we're looking at.
Right. Not necessarily the quality, but just attractiveness, you're saying? I mean,
maybe increase, well, we want both, but number one, what can we do to make that area more attractive to citizens coming down? And then I think they're going to be paying more attention to the quality and wanting to do more to help on that. So what things could we do along that river edge, along that column to, clean up the river? There's a lot of debris that I see that could probably be cleaned up. Maybe getting the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, FFA, together to, do some cleanup efforts, and then maybe an increase of water flow to, just make it more attractive, for usage. And then, we could really start to get the public's attention about the water quality.
Yeah, I think you're right on target with some of our goals were, start doing more river cleanups, adopting water bodies, taking personal responsibility for it. Those are just key points. It's going to be difficult. There's no silver bullet. And, but I think there's things that we can do, and we'll have to work at it as a collaborative effort with city government and state and everybody else. But definitely trash would make it look We can clean the trash up in the river. It'll make it look a lot cleaner. Probably people use it more often, that kind of situation. And but even those things, it does take resources and time to do and commitment from the public. So,
Well, and that's where I'm going to challenge the environmental department, public works, and the parks department. There's your resources right there to begin with, and then let's bring in the service groups. We've done it at the Whittier neighborhood. We've done it along the railroad tracks through the downtown area. So there's no reason that we can't do it along our river's edge, which we're proud of our river. We're proud of our falls.
Totally support your concept, and that's what direction we're going. So,
hope to see something.
Good.
Brings the question to my mind, Bob. Who controls the flow of the Big Sioux through Sioux Falls? Who says how much goes over, the diversion channel, and how much comes through the town?
There's a master plan with the Corps of Engineer that manages the flood control system, the levees and the dams. But technically, the city is basically managing the river flows based upon that management plan.
Okay. This question's come up twice now to me here in the last few weeks. Why are we putting dog parks along the river if we're worried about the dog waste going into the river?
It's a good question. I can't answer that.
Okay.
There's been discussion about that.
Yeah, a little bit more planning may be involved in that. So, okay.
I do.
Councilor Urbanbach.
One more. Sorry. Thank you. And Councilor Anderson brought it up, and one of the questions I get, and I hadn't thought about the dog parks along the river, but one of the questions I get is during the recreation season, there are folks that like to kayak, which isn't, Councilor Rolfing and I were talking, I've seen kids in inner tubes in the river, and I just want to yell at them, get out. But I don't. But the question is, there are folks in town who want to kayak, and the river is at a level for a very short period of time where you can kayak it from about 57th and Western down to Kiwanis Park, I think is about where you can go. Mm-hmm. Why can't we increase that level of water for a longer period of time for the recreational season so that we, again, because I think Kenny's right, get people into that water, onto the water, they'll start to see what the quality really is like. And they start to have buy-in, but we control the river depth,
right,
and don't allow kayaking for a longer period of time. Is there a way that can change?
And that's one of our goals, is basically to put a water quality component in that flood management control plan. And I think we can. There's times that we have lower river flows through the core of the city that we could have higher flows. And I canoe the river myself quite often with my children. I go down from Skunk Creek and end up down by Statue David and pull out and that type of thing. And it is a beautiful river to canoe in that people don't realize. But I know like kayakers and canoers, it's a great little canoe. If we can basically get some of that sediment out of the river, increase the flows, like you said, it could be a very heavily used urban. And I want to clarify something too, is that it's not meeting the standard for immersion recreation, which is swimming, but most of the time it meets the standard for limited contact. Mm-hmm. So it's safe enough to canoe and those types of activities in it. And I do that without any hesitation. So
right, exactly. I'm just thinking those kids in bathing suits in the
exactly right. So
yeah, thank you again.
Thank you,
Councilor Anderson.
One last thing, and I don't know if yourself or maybe Trent Lubers could answer this. One other water source that we have here in the downtown area is the Eastside Quarry. Mm-hmm. And I know that the city had approached the DNR about some resolutions to that area. I guess I just wanted to see if we had any updates of what we were going to do with that property over there.
And I just want to make sure you're talking about the quarry near the stockyards.
That is correct.
Yeah, that is a city-owned piece of property. We do own the quarry. The city has been evaluating options to use it. Matter of fact, I have even thrown out the idea, should we make it an urban waterway? Should we make it a recreational water for the urban center? But those are big decisions that have to be made by somebody else. We even considered the possibility of just doing away with the quarry by filling it up with soils. So there's a lot of ideas out there what to do with it. It's just somebody needs to make a decision.
I thought the fill-in option was.
We
no
found it
longer
wasn't
on the table.
feasible. It wasn't feasible versus hauling the soils out to the landfill. So it was determined it wasn't economically feasible to fill it with soils.
Well, I and maybe a couple other council members remember when we were younger that area was utilized for a lot of swimming.
It is fenced off now for liability reasons, but we do find some youngsters that are very, very innovative and get by the fence. So.
All righty. Thank you very much, Mr. Capel.
Thank you.
Any other new business for our informational meeting from the council? Not, meeting adjourned. Council meeting at 7.